Welcome to the BA Knowledge Share. In the past couple of videos, we went through how to build out some use case diagrams as well as use case scenarios. This is the last video in terms of that series. In this video, we will go through how to build essentially class diagrams based off of payment processing tutorial that we've been working through in terms of use case diagrams. So the key thing is to understand how do you transition from building out use cases to use case scenarios to the class diagrams. In some cases, you could end up building entity relationship diagrams, but really the thought process behind it is very similar. So in our past videos, if you are familiar with it, please, and if you want to review it, please review them. The link will be provided below. So in this case, we've defined a payee. We've defined from our last video, we defined the bank's institution as well as the company. But now in this case, we have identified, what I'm doing is I'm identifying some key entities over here that will help build out your class diagrams, which ultimately will help build out the database and the data elements within the system, the payment processing system. So in this case, we now have identified, and I've gone ahead and I've done this work ahead of time. You have a couple of entities over here. You have your payment entity, your customer entity. In this case, it was the payee, your order that you're placing, as well as your order details. You can expand on this class diagram, include some more entities, but let's keep it very simple for now, just so you understand the thought process behind how to build these entities or this class diagram in general. So in this case, we have a payment, and I'm using the draw.io tool, which is a free tool online that you can leverage. So just something to keep in mind as we move along. So you have a payment entity over here, and within the payment entity, you have a couple of items over here, or some data points over here. So in this case, you could have an amount, which could end up being a float. So I wouldn't worry too much about what float is, but let's just stick to the amount. Now, in terms of the operations, you could include operations at the bottom over here, but I want to keep it very simple, just so that you understand what's going on over here. So we'd think of entities as a noun. So in this case, it's payment. So let's put this aside over here. So we're not going to use that. So payment over here is exists. So let's copy and paste the payment, and let's move on to the bottom over here, and let's look at the methods of payment, right? So you could have different methods of payment, and in our example, we specifically only created or used, we can use check, or we could use, in this case, let's use debit instead of check. And in this case, let's use credit. So credit is an entity, and then so these are going to link to each other. So in this case, let's link this to this, or let's delete this for now. All right, so in this case, what we're going to do is take an arrow and then place that over here. So essentially, the method of payment is going to be your debit. All right, and then your other method of payments going to be credit. So let's move that over here. All right, so now that we have these two connecting dots, let's move this a little bit towards the bottom over here. Okay, let's move these arrows as well. So we will be leveraging these over here. So these sort of arrows build out those associations and those relationships between different entities. And as I mentioned earlier, an entity is a noun. Now, the next sort of entity that we want to build out is the order. So let's sort of copy and use the same box over here. And let's move to the order. Now, think about what would you need in terms of the order. What are some of the data elements that you would need? So without sort of really adding anything, let's sort of brainstorm, right? So you would have an order, probably order date, order quantity. So let's write these down here: date, quantity, oops, and maybe you have an order ID. right? So you would have an order ID. Let's change that over here. So in this case, you would have your order, and in that I've added up order ID, which is a specific unique ID for that specific order. You always want to have some sort of unique ID for these entities. So even maybe in under payment, you would have, let's see, maybe a payment ID, okay, which would be unique to that specific item. Right, so let's increase the size here and bring this down. There you go. All right, so now in terms of the order over here, you have three things over here. Now underneath the status, you could include the operations, right? So what can you do with operations is that you could actually calculate the total. You could actually calculate taxes. All right, so these are all sorts of the methods that you want to perform with this information. So you would include that underneath over here after a line. So now the question now becomes, well, how do you connect the, what is the relationship between an order and a payment? So let's think through this without even putting any symbols in here. So an order could be, let's put this over here. An order may have one payment methodology or can accept one payment type or payment method. An order can accept multiple payment methods. Okay, so there could be a one-to-many relationship going from the order to the payment. Let's sort of reverse the order here. What sort of relationship exists between a payment and an order? So a payment can only be made for one order. So one payment can be made for one order. Can you have one payment made for multiple orders? Maybe, but in this case, let's keep a rule where you can only have one payment per order. All right. So in this case, let's see how we would sort of put those relationships together. And it doesn't look that pretty, but it will. Let's make it look pretty. All right. So let's use this over here, and we could leverage that, or let's just put a line here. Okay, and sort of move it around. So back to this diagram over here, we have the order. I did set up the relationships using this line over here to your left. I did add the relationship between order and payment, which is a one-to-many relationship, meaning an order can have multiple payment IDs or payment methods versus a payment can only be applied to one order. Now, another sort of entity that we can add over here is the customer. So let's go ahead and add a customer entity over here. And so think about what sorts of customer entities, elements you can have. So even without sort of even adding anything here, you could have a customer ID, which is unique to that specific customer. You could have customer name. You could split that customer name into first and last name. You could have customer ID as well as customer address, I apologize. Also, you could have a customer phone number. So anything customer related, you would have sort of those data elements included over here. So in this case, instead of calling it order, let's call it customer. And then you would have a customer ID. And then you would have a customer customer name. And then you could have a customer address. Now, in terms of operations over here, I wouldn't include any sort of operations over here because it's not really a data element that where you would require calculations. So in this case, it would just be a list of data elements over here. Now, in terms of the relationship between the customer and the order, right? So there isn't a relationship between a payment and a customer, right? A customer makes a payment, right? So that is a relationship, but is there any sort of relationship that can be established where a customer can make a payment once, but it would be through the order. Okay, so essentially, let's sort of copy this over here and then build that relationship with the customer and the order. So let's look at what does that relationship look like? One is that a customer could have multiple relationships, could place multiple orders. So that's one relationship, right? So they could place no orders or they could place multiple orders. So let's sort of move this over here. Okay. But instead of a one to many, it would be a zero to many. So you could have zero or none. In this case, why is it one to many? Because at a minimum, you need to have made a payment, meaning one payment, right? So in this case, customer may just not do anything, or customer may have placed multiple orders. But an order can only be placed by one customer. So in this case, it would be one. So let's move that up over here. All right. So this is a very sort of simple um, uh, class diagram based off of a use case diagram. There can be other instances. You could actually split up the order into the order detail and the item or the commodity that they're looking to purchase. Like in this case, the example was shoes. So let's sort of do a quick review. So in our first video in this series, we spoke about building a use case diagram. In the second video, we spoke about building a use case scenarios, and I showed you how to walk through it. We used the BA Knowledge Share template to build that. And in this video, I showed you how to build out a class diagram, which essentially we used three sorts of entities. One is the customer, the second is the customer payment, and then the third one was the order. Now within the order, you can sort of have an order details. You can extend this even further to build out order details, but we kept it very simple. We built out a payment entity. You know, payment has different payment methods. In this case, you would have a debit or a credit payment method. And under that, you would have the debit amount or credit amount. Under payment as well, you could have calculations, meaning you could deduct the amount in the bank based on the payment that's been deducted from that bank account. So you could have a payment sort of operation included in the payment section, but you can sort of build upon this. The second entity was order, where we built out three data elements, which is the order ID, order date, order status. You had the operations built out over here. We built out the relationship between order and payment, as well as order and the customer. And then underneath customer, we have three data elements as well. So that being said, I hope this has helped you out in terms of getting you a jump start on how to build out data models, in this case, class diagram. And I do wish you good luck on these tutorials. And if you do find value in these tutorials, please do subscribe to this channel, as well as visit our website, baknowledgeshare.com, in addition to visiting our Facebook page for BA Knowledge Share. Until next time, see you then.